Hey, hello. Sorry for the minor delay.
No, it's okay. As long as everybody's fine.
I was there, prepped, ready to go, finally, and then of course, being the individual that I am, I got distracted, and then people and Googling stuff and this kind of carry on.
We spoke with the dev team a couple of days ago, and somehow the conversation went to the like topic of cooking, like who likes
Ah,
cooking, who doesn't like cooking. And one of the developers said, "I would love to, but the problem is that every time there is a period that you need to wait for something, I always get distracted, and then I like wake up several hours later when everything is already burned."
I, I really enjoy cooking, but and I also would be susceptible to such a problem. So I set alarms for like everything. Like if I needed to, I would set an alarm for toast.
Yeah, there are these jumping things, right? So you don't need to worry.
Exactly.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, so today we're also going to talk about what's cooking in general and in Beam specifically. So yeah, a lot of action recently, mostly related to dealing with all kinds of things that we want to fix before the 7.2 release, which is why it's still not out there. But it's because if we find problems, before the release, it means that somebody else doesn't find them after the release. So it's always better this way. And today we are going to talk about the development process going forward. We want to change it a little bit. We want to make it kind of a little bit more, I would say, not like decentralized in a way, more like community oriented. For like many different reasons, we were not very decentralized before, and for some many different reasons, we want to be now. So I will talk about like why, where we started, and where we're going with that. And we will start kind of developing this new process. I will also talk about how I think it might work. Everything I'm saying, by the way, is very up to debate. So any feedback you might have or any questions you might have, you are more than welcome to provide. Yeah, that's the general idea. Not too many other things happened this week out there, so we will probably focus on Beam related topics.
Yeah, it's been relatively quiet, like it, quiet and getting quieter every week in the crypto space. But many good things coming for Beam, and I'm excited to talk about the like plans for the future development, and also excited to hear from the community, whether it's in this space or going forward, on their ideas and their suggestions and this kind of stuff.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's get started with how it all began, and without too much reminiscence about the early days, but we started as a company. We started with a kind of very centralized, kind of tight team. It grew larger over the time, and even like after quite couple of years, still most of the development was done by the team, and with some additions here and there from community developers and people who contributed all kinds of projects, ideas, systems, etc. And Beam had like these two major periods before the smart contracts and after the smart contracts. And right now we're moving towards the kind of end, not exactly the end, but the end of the first milestone for our DeFi ecosystem that was announced quite a long time ago already, because we will release these first versions of each of the basic class of applications, the DEX and the bridges, like all of those will be released pretty soon. And once we do that, we kind of, let's say, in some sense, complete these kind of essential steps, right? In terms of the infrastructure, we have everything we need right now. We have all the infrastructure components. Yes, most of them can be improved indefinitely. I know, like we are working on some improvements, for example, to the Blockchain Explorer. Right now on the .NET, you can already see an updated version. Far from perfect, but very kind of improved in terms of showing the states of the contracts and states of the assets. So yeah, a lot of work still to be done, but at least in terms of the availability, you now have all of the key elements to build various kinds of decentralized applications. And after the recent hard fork, when we have significantly reduced the cost of creating a new asset, we see that more people starting to do exactly that, creating new assets and using them for various different projects and ideas. We see more action in the development community, in the BIM development support channel. People are asking questions about how to do this and how to do that. And it means that like we're on the right track. Yes, it's still like very early days for like somebody actually doing a massive project on BIM, but we do have more activity and it's very good. So we're going in the right direction. So in terms of how we have been operating until today, mostly it was moving in major like versions. So we had like the fourth version, which is right now is 7, which is like major releases with upgrades and certain kind of major improvements. And then within these releases, we had several milestones usually. So for example, right now we're working on the 7.2. So the 7.2 is, let's say, the minor release of this major like 7 version, which is since the last hard fork, right? So that's how we worked until this day. We didn't have any specific deadlines, but we did have contents for the release that we wanted to achieve. So 7.2, for example, was about the asset swaps. And that's the kind of the most significant addition to this version. But obviously, we also introduced a lot of improvements to various components and bug fixes. Like so we included all that. The decentralized applications did not or were not aligned exactly with these versions. So, for example, upgrades to, let's say, NFT gallery, they were not aligned along the same line of versions. So we didn't have specific versions for these applications. We just created like a new version of the contract, updated it, and updated the application itself. So the versioning was mostly related to the infrastructure components, to the BIM wallets, and to the BIM node.
And a small question here, just to kind of clarify, is will the dApps be kind of in line in general with the wallet releases, or will they be more upgraded on the fly as and when needed and this kind of thing versus the wallet releases?
Yeah, so it actually depends. It depends on whether the application requires new features that should be provided, let's say, by the wallet API. So if you don't need anything outside the API that currently exists, obviously the application can be updated without necessity to release a new version of the BIM wallet.
Okay, cool.
During the early days, like during the last year, because most of the applications were like new to us in terms of the features that they would require from the wallet, usually major updates to the applications also required some updates to the, let's say, wallet API, because you needed to get like more information, let's say, about the assets or more information about like, for example, in order to implement multi-sig in the dApps, we needed to add some features also to the wallet API that allowed that, right? So the key management. So all of these things we kind of did simultaneously. We both created new applications and we discovered what they need in terms of the infrastructure support. And then we also added this in the infrastructure. So that was the process.
Yeah, That makes sense. Also, I have a request, so I'll let them jump in now. Harsh, give me 1 second because I'm a Twitter space noob, and let's see what Harsh has a question. Harsh, hello. You should be able to unmute yourself now and ask a question.
Hello.
Hey, Harsh, what's up?
So, as a developer, I tried to look into the documentation for working with BVM in order to develop certain the app, but I'm having trouble getting it understanding it. So, my question was, uh, when will the documentation be improved in order to occupy more developers? As that's something Beam want to do and do not want to centralize the development of the app as well.
Great question. Thank you very much for raising this topic. So we terribly suck at creating documentation. It's probably one of our weaknesses, like all over. And it's not like just it's nothing new. It's been like this for a long time. And every time we say like yeah, we will try to improve it, and we do something and we do improve it a little, but it's never enough because until today the amount of stuff we have been adding with each release was just very large, and a lot of things changed. So I would like to answer your question in two parts. The first part is whenever you have any question or any problem or something that's not clear, or even a specific documentation that you would like to have, just contact me directly and contact our Beam developer support. And we will try to help you in any way we can because we know we have a bad documentation, but we don't want to discourage you from actually building on Beam. So we promise to try to help you in any way we can. That's the first part. The second part is that now, as we will kind of create this new process, which will be less, and I will explain in a minute, less about kind of major releases and more about specific like features and community like ideas, requirements, and applications. So we will also try to focus on kind of improving the general experience of getting into development. We know it's a huge, um, you know, learning curve to because it's C++, completely different architecture, not compatible with anything else. And yeah, just contact me directly or contact developer support, and we will try to help in any way we can.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. That's fine. I'll try to. Yes, there is a group also called Beam Developer. So yes, I understand it. But uh, to go ahead, while other projects in the space are spending so much money on onboarding developers, um, I think it would be a healthy thing to do and write proper documentation so developers don't get discouraged when they are trying to develop on Beam. So if I ask
Absolutely.
you if I ask you a certain question and you answer me, that's wasting your time also, and it's not reproducible. So someone else had the same issue. He will ask it again, and that will again you will have to answer that same question again and again. So I think having a proper documentation should be a priority for the team.
You're absolutely correct. And yeah, we will work on improving that. And you're correct that we do have lost because after all, it's Telegram and specific developers asking questions. So one of the things that we will probably need to do is at least to start collecting the FAQ of things that have been already asked. And maybe we'll try to use our forum better for that. We'll see. But yes, you're absolutely correct. We will have to improve that. Thank you. And yeah, we'll try to work on that as well. Okay. Any other questions we have?
We did have a quick question in the Beam Telegram main channel from Beam Bots, and the question was, is there any word or update that, because I can't find it. Oh, here. what's the status of the Beam NFT Gallery V3?
Okay, so good question. Beam Gallery V3 was kind of a little bit stuck behind all the rest of the applications that we really wanted to complete. So right now, most of the features that we discussed are just sitting there, and this is something that we will also once we complete these several applications that are right now in the pipeline and awaiting release, right? The bridges especially and the decks. This will free up a lot of people, and it will free up more time to deal with the next steps. So in terms of the next steps, this is exactly the point that this change that I'm talking about is going to address. So we will first create this kind of list of ideas, suggestions, and requests for features, improvements, etc. For example, due to recent kind of activities, and since, as you know, Halloween is coming, and Halloween is the NFT time, as all we know, on Beam at least, there have been a lot of requests from many different people, features specifically to the NFT gallery. It's one of our more successful and kind of engaging projects. And it was from ranging from royalties and up to like limited edition NFTs, unlimited edition NFTs. There is like a whole list of ideas, features, and requests that we have accumulated so far, and it just keeps growing. So Max is usually the one who is just collecting all of these requests in his notepad. And the first thing that we will do, we'll create a process where anyone can create a feature request, explain exactly what he wants or she wants to happen. And then we will have a discussion about that in the forum. And then we will see, try to prioritize between all of these different requests and find what's going to be developed and what's the next one, etc. And all of this will take place in the forum. Now, I think that in most situations, it will be clear enough where the priority stands, so we will not need to, hold a formal DAO vote on that. But if we see that there are some very large feature requests that require for something that's really controversial, things that need to be voted on, we also have an ability to create this as a kind of official DAO vote on chain with all kind of implications. Now, after this first process of formulating the request is complete, and by the way, this process also includes the evaluation from the developer and the feedback, and right about the current Beam developers, people who have a good understanding of how this feature should be implemented, and so they can assess how much time it will take, whether it's even possible, or what's the limits there. And from this conversation, we hope to get to some realistic requirement set, right? So, for example, if you want, let's say, I don't know, royalties, right? So how this can work, what exactly is determined by the platform, what's determined by the user. So all of these things need to be part of this conversation. So eventually, after this discussion is over, we have some realistically implementable and relatively clear specification that we can start working on. Okay, so that's the first part of the process.
And this all makes sense. And I want to say, for those that are listening and haven't checked out the forum, Beambot's put a really good forum post up on the NFT galleries, and I personally apologize because I said I was going to reply, and because I kind of knew it wasn't the central focus, I left it, and then, as my brain does, I forgot about it. But I think the NFT gallery for Beam is one of the really interesting, one of the most interesting dApps, now specifically, but also will be in 1, 2, 3 years time. So I'm definitely, firstly, apologize, and secondly, definitely going to jump in and give some thoughts, some very strong and opinionated thoughts that I have on the NFT gallery and the direction and what's happening and this kind of stuff, because NFTs, at least for me, are fascinating and super exciting especially for Beam.
Yeah. So definitely gallery is amazing, and specifically Beambots really invested also a lot of effort into making it better. And that's essential part of this process of like kind of raising these ideas, issues, and try to figure out what we can implement and at which time. The second part is like who is going to do it, and this is kind of very controversial. Not controversial, but it's like a difficult topic. It's not so simple because uh, what we want to do is we want to move to the bounty program. The bounty program means that every feature will be assigned a bounty, which can be combined from funds from all kinds of sources. It can be funds from foundation, from the DAO, it can be funds from individuals who want to contribute or donate or what. The source is kind of one part of the story, like how we contribute towards the bounty to implement this feature. And I really would like it to be in some kind of transparent way. So maybe we will even create a dedicated app for that, like a smart contract that allows you to allocate funds towards a specific idea or goal or feature or sub-feature. And that's like the first part of the story. Then we want to understand who can implement it and how much time it will take, or like how much, let's say, man hours, or like how much effort it will take, because this is where the most of the problems are when we talk about software development. Software development is very unpredictable, not because software developers are not good at estimating their work, but because sometimes you think something is simple and it's not, or on the other hand, you think something is complicated and then you find an easy solution. It's very complex to try to really align this on a project basis. This is the first problem. The second problem is that there is almost no such thing as like implement something and forget about it, right? There is always a need to either fix bugs that were found later or update things as other things change, right? The infrastructure changes or something is updated, so you need to update your application as well. The support, so-called support topic. All of these things are difficult to manage. And it's easier in a bit when you have a team working full time, because then this kind of it stretches. You can always reallocate resources. You can talk about and rearrange tasks and start with something then put it aside and complete it later. When you talk about bounty-based development, it's always much more complicated. And this is one of the reasons that I'm really glad that we have remained in this like more centralized kind of structure until today, because it allowed us to move forward very quickly, create a lot of things, break a lot of things, debug them, create several forks in the process. And it would have been much more difficult, or let's say not, also much slower, because you don't want to rush things. You want to discuss everything properly. It's not longer like you can just say, oh, listen, can you please implement that? And then say, never mind, let's do it another way, right? Because people are working full time, so it's okay. But when you're talking about bounties, the process should be different. It should first start with kind of a more detailed discussion and elaboration of what we want to do and how we want to do it. And then we find like the best person to do it and give him the bounty to do this. And it's better in the long term. And that's why I'm glad we're actually moving to this system now. But it's slower, and it's something that it's not like I didn't. It's not only my opinion. You can read about Ethereum, for example. I think people who were in the early stages of Ethereum, when they were still a small team, like kind of more centralized, or more like a team of individuals governed, like with not governed but managed, like by Vitalik and a few others. So it's always a trade-off between like this kind of bounty-based decentralization and prioritization and speed. So there is always this kind of trade-off that you have to consider.
Absolutely. And I was just looking for the article that you shared to share, and maybe I'll have to share it after the space. There's a really good article explaining like about the early days of Ethereum and how it was a lot more centralized than now, and talking a bit about like the trade-offs in terms of speed and this kind of thing that come with that little bit of centralization versus a more bounty oriented or this kind of thing structure. Like now, especially that most of the like really nitty gritty milestones for Beam have been met, but it makes a lot of sense to have the bounties for smaller stuff, for things to do with like decentralized applications, to do with the NFT marketplace and these kind of things. I think that this can be massively beneficial to Beam and also to the people in the community, especially the developers that are looking to do stuff, looking to build things, looking to get involved with.
Yeah, I think Harsh wanted to say something.
Harsh.
Maybe not. Maybe he just unmuted himself. Anyway, let's move on.
Let's move on. Yeah. If Harsh
yeah.
or anyone else, if you do want to jump in and say anything, ask any questions, let us know your thoughts. Just chuck a request up and I'll accept you and bring you in and you can ask away. Otherwise, Telegram chat and I can ask it for you. Both okay.
All right. So once we have the bounty available, right? So there are two scenarios here. The first scenario is that this bounty is not enough. Like it's not enough money to implement this feature. For example, let's say we have a bounty of $1,000, right? So just, out of, so obviously all of the bounties will be set in Beam or other assets that have a price because after all, that's what the developer who is going to be working on this feature wants. By the way, it can be also kind of additionally sponsored by other tokens from other projects. That's also always fine, but there should be some financial component in this because after all, somebody invests some amount of work. So this is kind of the situation that I expect will happen most often because it's very difficult to estimate, but also these things cost a lot of a lot, right? So it's not like even a feature that seems relatively small, like it requires usually cooperation of several people. Because, for example, it's not just enough to have a developer, you also need to have a design for it. You also need to have a QA in some way who it or roll it out on .NET, which is, I'm very glad that we have the .NET to basically make things available community at the earliest stages. And then we can provide feedback. And then after this feedback, some improvements. So it's always this combination of effort from several individuals, which is not very simple to estimate. So each feature, let's say even royalties, right, for the NFTs, it will probably have several steps. Now, we don't want it to look like something that was just glued on to the existing application to be consistent and in line with the existing design, because we want to maintain some level of usability. And this means that we will probably have to make some adjustments to existing things and how they look and how they feel and how they behave, right? So it's always very complicated. And this is kind of the most difficult situation that I envision we're going to have to deal with, right? Do I have any idea how it's going to go? No, not exactly, right? I never worked in this system before. I mostly worked with dedicated teams for dedicated projects. So it will be new for me as well. It will require from all of us, right, as a community, a lot of control. So for example, if you see that something is not moving, something is stuck, something needs a decision and nobody's working on it, so it's kind of our own mutual responsibility to try to kick all of these things, down the line towards the goal. And it's not because we're all lazy, like I personally am, but the developers are very hardworking. It's because there is going to be, I believe, a lot of interesting requests out there. We will need to prioritize them carefully, and we will need to see how we can implement them. So it will require kind of this mutual effort. And then we will need to find kind of this middle ground of how we can make this work. Because like I don't imagine there will be like such huge bounties that will just cover, whatever. They just, build my royalties. Here, take however much money you want, and just build it. It's not going to, right? So we will have to really work hard on this of figuring out an efficient way of building things. Yes, attracting developers and documentation is one of the points that we definitely address. But regardless, it's going to be challenging. That's what I imagine it's going to be. Like I don't think it will be simple, especially not at first. I think with time we will gain more understanding of how it works, how we can do things this way. But at least at first, I expect it's going to be quite challenging. And like I personally am kind of working towards this expectation that is going to be a major hustle for me to make this work. I think it will be very good long term if we manage to bring this barrier and just get to this model and make it working. But I also don't want to end up as the projects that we see with, I don't know, Ethereum, right? A great example once again. Things that are taking years to complete. I don't want point as well. I want it to be like both more decentralized, but at the same time move a little bit faster than like waiting several years for a feature.
Yeah, the old ETH2 soon TM was very, very long process. I have a bit of a question, and what spurred the question is a comment from Unseen Shadow King in the Telegram chat. He said most important, in my opinion, is to catch the attention from white hat hackers. And so I guess my question is, we've spoken a lot about like bounties in terms of features, in terms of like improvements and this kind of stuff. Would there also be some kind of bounties more on the side of securities and this kind of stuff? Security rather than securities, sorry.
Um, so let me think how to answer that. There is always a problem when like what yeah, obviously. So okay, let me start from a different direction. Until this day, like we have been paying relatively small bounties for relatively minor security issues, mostly in the website. Like nothing can, critical was like discovered like that. There was one time when we were approached by a group of white hat hackers. They said that they found a severe vulnerability in the code. But after the investigation, by the way, we gave them like we didn't give, but we locked the bounty in an escrow, and then they provided us with the code, and then we found that the bug that they actually thought they discovered was actually in their experiment. It was in their code. So there was no bug. They just kind of played with the code, and then they created the bug themselves and reported it. And they were extremely polite. They said, we're sorry, our bad. They returned the money. So that was the only kind of situation over these last 4 years that we have been kind of close to a bug being discovered. Obviously, if somebody comes forward and says, listen, I found a severe bug, we will do anything we can to compensate this person. If it's a bug that somebody, like usually the way it works from what I hear is that somebody steals, million and then returns 90 million, right? Something like that.
Yeah. And like this is, I mean, I shouldn't laugh because it's obviously like money that's belonging to someone and this kind of stuff. And I myself have been a victim to certain things as well. But I can't help but find it a little bit humorous that often the bug bounty is like kind of thrown out after the fact to try and get some of the money back. And one of the funniest examples of that was one of the most recent as well, which was the Mango Markets one. Did you see about this?
Yeah, I heard, like you told me, that this person actually came forward and bragged about it in Twitter.
Yeah, and what I didn't say during the call earlier is that they hacked Mango Markets and then they created a proposal on the like Mango DAO or whatever it is, and said like, hey, we will give you a bounty of like 40 million or something like this, and not seek any like legal kind of consequences for you. And they, of course, like made the
Nice.
proposal and then had all of this stuff that they hacked to also vote in the proposal and this kind of stuff. And it was very, very like, what the fuck kind of a moment.
Yeah, it's this kind of modern hostage situation, right? So you have enough, you stole enough voting power to basically make yourself
Yeah.
free of the accusations. That's great. Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah. So what I'm trying to say here is that we never published a specific number. Like, somebody who bug will earn such amount of money, and also it will not be feasible for us to pay. Let's say somebody says, "Here, I have your like I don't know, $100 million. Give me 10." It's like we just don't have that kind of money, unfortunately, right? I wish we would. I would gladly pay it, but we don't. Um, and that's why we always, like, we never ignored any information that was supplied to us from people who claim to be, to have found security flaws. We always to them, we always try to figure out what happened, and in most cases we paid. It was relatively small amounts, and once again, it were like mostly things around the blockchain, not in the blockchain itself. Yeah, so that's the current situation. We will definitely address any issues that were found, but regarding the exact amount of bounty for that, we are not currently in a situation where we can just, and by the way, I heard some projects talking about setting very large bounties to avoid exactly such situation.
Yeah, and I mean it makes sense. Like if a project has a huge kind of treasury and this kind of stuff to give like decent bounties and this kind of thing for such situations. One thing I do find really like interesting is that the majority of like these big exploits and this kind of stuff are more on the dApp side, like the decentralized applications, whether it's like manipulating markets to take some funds or using sort of problems with the dApp's code and this kind of thing, rather than like the underlying infrastructure and this kind of thing.
Yeah, websites that were hacked. We saw address generators that were hacked. So yeah, we saw a lot of things happening. Okay, so just to bring us back to this process point, because I think it's very important, and obviously this is just the beginning of the long road. But one of the things that I would really like to do is to either create a new Twitter space specifically for the developer agenda, or I don't know, maybe use this Twitter space and this time frame. We will need to see like whether we want to have separate Twitter space for that. Also, obviously, your input is very welcome. But I would like to spend some time each week doing two things. First of all, reporting the progress and reporting the status. And it's also very much for me, because once, like, let me give you an example. Once we have set up this Twitter space, I have never missed it once, including times that I was on vacation and, in all kinds of different places. But the very fact that we have this format, which is constant and, at the same time every week, you remember at first we would bi-weekly, and then you said, let's make it every week. It will be better. It will make us more kind of on track.
Yeah, and I mean this was my main reason was because I would struggle to remember which week was it on and which it wasn't, and I think that we made the right decision, and personally have a lot of fun like in the spaces. I think I might have missed one. Apologies, but I have a lot of fun in the spaces, and I definitely also think that it would be really good to have like a development specific one. Surrounding what's been mentioned in this space, outside of this space, because I think there's a lot to like cover what we usually do is like cover a lot of the general crypto stuff when there is, and talk about Beam a lot as well. But mostly from like ideas kind of perspective rather than the nitty gritty stuff on the development front and the bounty stuff specifically. So I think that would be very like very useful for everyone, to be honest, and I'd enjoy it.
So I also think that we should do it every week, even if the update will be relatively short. Like, yes, this was delayed. That's even if it takes like several minutes, doesn't have to be a full hour necessarily. We'll see. We'll see, right? It depends on how it goes. But it would be very beneficial, I think, for us as a community to have the understanding that every week Beam team and Beam kind of community comes together, talks about the development status, and it creates a very kind of structured format that we all understand. Another thing is that even discussions will start in the forum, eventually they will be converted into issues on GitHub. And the reason for that is even though the forum is much better for discussions, GitHub is much better to linking the activity and the issue to the code, to the specific pull request. You understand like where the code is, what's going on in like low-level technical implementation details. Even though GitHub added recently a separate module for community discussions, I still think the forum is a better kind of starting point. So we'll see how it goes. And then basically inside the forum, there will be a link like under the specific we create for a feature request. Once we reach the point of the discussion that we decide that we have enough information to start working on that, we will create an issue on GitHub and we will link it. And also if we created a specific application to contribute funds or like for bounties, etc., we will also try to link a specific issue there. It creates a lot of structure. That's how we worked until today. So for those of you who has visited our GitHub and looked at the boards, like every board is organized per release, like 7.2. What are the open issues? What are the issues in progress? And then we have like several stages, testing, tested, and then ready for like deployment. We also had a separate board for kind of design tasks for some projects. Like for example, when you have a DApp, so every DApp has two parts. It has the smart contract part, and it has the like visual UI application. So we need to create a design for that, and the designs were located in Figma, which was not open to the public, but the copies of the screens, in certain cases, I think even the link, but the link I think was closed. But the screenshots were always included in the issue itself. So it was very easy to track how it looks, like what's exactly the idea of the UI there. And once again, like it depends. Like some things are obvious, right? So it's just adding a field or some change. But some things actually can lead to very heated discussions. Do you want to hear a funny story?
Absolutely.
Like, be your guess. We're talking about like the Beam wallet, Beam desktop wallet specifically. Like what, it's not even a feature, or like what thing created the most discussions and deliberations and arguing and fighting and I don't know, a lot of things inside the Beam desktop wallet.
I wouldn't have a clue actually.
Yeah, so it's really funny, but in fact, it was whether we should show the blockchain height on the main screen.
Okay. And why, or what was the different kind of sides to it?
Yeah, so there was a kind of conflict between two groups. The group that wanted, kind kind of the blockchain stuff should be obvious, right? We have a blockchain height. It's very important information. We can see it move dating. Here, a new block is created, right? So let's see it. And the other camp said, yeah, but we are talking about users here. They just want to send funds. They want to, do their activities. They don't really care what block you're currently on necessarily. You want to see that, you go to the Blockchain Explorer. And I was in the camp that was for showing the blockchain height and the changes, because when I open the wallet, I don't know, click on something, and I just want to see when it's complete changes there, like I can and go it and check out the result. But I lost in that specific debate to the usability camp, which was, for hiding this information because it's not user friendly. All of these numbers out there, like who needs that? And right now, the only place you can see this information in the Beam Desktop Wallet is when you go to settings, and inside settings, there is this small section, general, I think it's called, or something like that, or network, I don't remember, where you can actually see the current block height.
Interesting.
Yeah. So like personally, one of the first, I think, things that I will create as a feature request is to add this information. Then we will, we will hear the input from the community whether they want it or not. But yeah, so these kinds of things, how to implement certain features, how to structure, UI and applications, they sometimes go into lengthy discussions. Everybody has an opinion, it's healthy, and we need to obviously address all of these ideas, but also at the same time, know how to manage this process so it doesn't go on forever, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And especially like coming back to what you mentioned earlier about while opening up things to bounties and this kind of stuff, it can kind of create some it definitely slows things down, but it can also make things drag on almost like for what feels in crypto like forever. And I think that's kind of important to find a good balance between like everything happening in a more decentralized manner whilst also being able to move and things be able to improve and increase like as they should.
Yeah, like when we started to discuss this internally, immediately there were like a lot of questions raised about, the technical process. Do you do kind of a prepayment? So you promise somebody, I don't know, some amount of money to do something. And then what? Like, do you give some advance, or do you just expect somebody to do the work and then trust you to pay? Or do you create an escrow, and how does it work, and who releases it? And how, like, so many things. Like, for example, when it was regular kind of stuff, it was very clear there was somebody getting, the money for amount of, but not amount, but it was basically a salary, and then providing an invoice, and like it was very, very kind of straightforward because this process is, covered by international laws, what you're currently located in, and wherever you pay taxes, wherever you do your accounting, you just, there is a way to work with you. When it's bounties, it's kind of, for me, it's much more difficult to understand exactly how these processes should go. So I will have to do a lot of learning as well. Like we in general, as Beam, will have to work it out. I think at first, at least, we'll approach this on a case-by-case basis, right? We will do a discussion. Who is the person? If it's somebody I know and I can trust, that it's not a problem. Here we go back to the trust thing, right, inside the blockchain. But yeah, so I can talk to a person. I can say, okay, like for example, somebody wanted to do something and then worked on it for, I don't know, for a week, and then he said, oh, you know what? It's not possible to do this, or I can do it, right? What do you do this in this case? How do you handle that? There are a lot of interesting dilemmas here. I will really appreciate if you know projects that work like that, and not Ethereum, like not 2 years or whatever, but projects that really make this work, especially smaller projects like we are. I would really love to get references, maybe talk to R&D managers there or people who are responsible for this process and learn from them. So if you have ever heard about such projects, I would really love to hear about them as well. If somebody cracked that or found a good working structure, I would really love to hear about that.
None come to the top of my head right now, but I'm sure something. So please let us know in the Telegram or let us know on Twitter or this kind of thing. I had a kind of question. When or where will we hear more about in text? When will we hear or see more about like the structure and the intention and this kind of stuff to give some feedback on from the community?
Yeah, so we have our newsletter tomorrow, and I will prepare this outline of things that I have just kind of described, broad strokes. I will try to it and detail it as much as I can, like provide as many different cases as possible, and we will create. I think in addition to a newsletter, I think we can also create a forum post out of it, so it can also have discussions of its own about the process in general. And this is how we will get started with that, right? So it's definitely like the first steps. And what we're going to do starting like once the 7.2 is out, I hope it will be this week, but I said it 2 weeks before, so I don't know. I hope currently we will find no more issues. But once the 7.2 is out, we will actually start this process. So we will create the first list of features. We might be able even to do this earlier for dApps, right? So for dApps, like most of the requests right now are from NFT marketplace and some other applications. So we will start there. And we will start working on that, right? So like we will see how it goes. Yeah, so I believe that until the end of this month, we will have something, initial running, and then we will just, work on improving it little by little.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is like important to emphasize is that like the initial kind of structure and this kind of thing will continue to be improved upon and this kind of stuff. So if you are having any problems or think that something's an issue, let us know and we can talk about it and look at ways to improve it as with everything. And as you mentioned, tomorrow it will be in the newsletter. So a quick plug, if you haven't already, head over to Substack and sign up for the Beam newsletter that comes out weekly on Mondays. Sometimes it's a little bit late, but it's always there.
Yep. A lot of work ahead of us.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of work like on the community front as well in terms of like getting familiar with applications, getting familiar with the new features and this kind of stuff. With the guys over at Nephrite looking to launch soon with the asset swaps, with the decks coming out. There's going to be a lot to do and a lot to stay on top of. And I think personally that it's a great time to be like sort of knuckling down and learning and getting familiar with these things.
Yeah, so recently I was really impressed with the amount of kind of new ideas, new people joining in, like with interest in developing things with Beam on Beam, and some of the projects were really impressive. And I really would love to make this work and create this kind of really working structure. But yeah, I'm a little bit, I admit, I have little experience in this type of development. I think it's time, I learned as well. And yeah, I hope it goes well, and we will put a lot of effort in making this work. Not going to be easy, at least at first, not for me. But yeah, let's see. With your help, I hope we will master it.
Absolutely. Exciting times ahead, I think.
Definitely. Just to kind of clarify something about the big things. So In terms of the overall the strategic roadmap of adding Ethereum virtual machine and creating the sidechain infrastructure, this point does not change. So it's not like we are trying to start with these minor releases, but the next hard fork is moving on just as it was discussed, as it was planned. In general, that's the direction that we're going to. We want to add EVM to Beam. We will be able to run Solidity smart contracts and Ethereum-based applications on Beam. And we will also try to create this approach where you can take Beam and run it as a side chain or run it as application-specific chain. So this is something that remains on track and goes nowhere. So it's not like we're changing the course in any way. Things will continue as promised.
Okay, and I think that's a very exciting thing in the pipeline as well. One of the many. We have a request from Dirty Rusky. Dirty Rusky, what's up?
Hey, how's it going, guys? I know this is kind of off topic. Maybe I just smoked too much weed, but you guys came out with the Beam anonymous name service, and I was just wondering, is there any way with the Mimblewimble protocol and the nature of it to implement the anonymous name service to some sort of a messaging system running on Beam chain as well, where I can send private emails or messages, which might take time to confirm, but they're still private and anonymous.
Yeah, so great question. The topic of an anonymous messenger based on Beam was actually raised several times by several different people, both within the team and out. And the answer is yes, it is possible. And it's possible in several different ways. So it's possible to have it really on chain. It's possible to have it as SBBS, kind of add-on on top of SBBS, because SBBS messages are also encrypted. They're sent directly. They're much faster. They don't require confirmations. You can also have a hybrid structure where you have this kind of, I don't know, depending of where do you want to put some checkpoints on chain. Now, why it didn't happen, or why didn't we go this way, is for several reasons. First of all, there's never been a consensus between us all whether this is actually something that will really bring benefit on top of existing services such as Proton Mail, if we talk about emails, or you have, for example, chats that are encrypted in Keybase. I'm not going to talk about WhatsApp and Telegram that say that they are end-to-end encrypted, blah, blah, because nobody believes that. But there are several services today which provide you with this functionality. Technically, it's possible. Yes, it's not a small feature. It's a project. It's something that's definitely worth raising and discussing. We do have some elements today that are using our SBBS to broadcast messages, both about the price changes, not as an oracle, but rather as this usability feature. Obviously, we use it to create transactions. We use it for broadcasting of atomic swap and asset swap offers. So yeah, we do have it. It's not free text form, so there is no kind of way for you to just type and it will be sent to another wallet. It can be done. It can be done. Once again, this is, for example, this is a great example, because this is a feature, if we would have been developing it, just like a team, the first step would be to create a proof of concept. And the proof of concept is this kind of minimalist implementation of this functionality, just to see how it works, how it looks like how do you use it. By the way, one of the, I would say, features that wanted but never were able to implement in a good way is an address book, right? Because how do you send message to someone? How do you know this someone? So you have an address, but in Beam, addresses, most of the addresses are temporary. So back then in the day, we didn't have a permanent address, a permanent offline address like we have today. But it was very difficult to understand, like, okay, so I want to send, let's say, even funds to somebody in the address book. How do I identify them? What happens if the address expires? What happens if they are not online? Like, so there are a lot of questions there, right? So the first kind
Right.
of step, yeah, would be to implement this kind of proof of concept, and then see whether it looks like something we can use, and if yes, then turn it into a feature.
So yeah, I think with the introduction with the bands, I think it may be something that I don't know. It's very interesting to kind of like look into, just with the fact that what's happening in the world, and there's really not many competitors to Proton Mail and stuff like that, to where you can send secure encrypted messages and know for a fact that they're going to be secure and encrypted. I think maybe it'd be good for someone to maybe try to build something like that on Beam.
Definitely something that will be a feature request at the early stages and will be discussed. Absolutely. Okay. Any more? Anyone else? All right.
From my side, no questions, and I cannot see any in the Telegram chat. But Jody Rushki, that is a really good question as well, I think, and seen it many times in the Telegram chat. And something that's always kind of comes to mind and thought of in this kind of stuff, and especially as you mentioned, it makes sense, like kind of as an addition to bands and this kind of stuff. I think bands is a wicked application, and if you haven't already, head on over to it, see what domains, what .beam domains you can get, and throw in some requests for that domain. You can buy them. All the information is on the forum as well. If you have any questions, yell out.
All right. So great. Thanks everyone for being here. We will continue updating you tomorrow in the newsletter and in the forum, and we will get this process started during the next. So first of all, the outline of the process will be on the forum. So if you have any comments or ideas or suggestions, just add them there. We will tweet about this as well. And we hope to start this process, actually, kick it off at the beginning of next month, probably with the DApp features, and then we will just, take it away and see how it rolls. Thanks a lot. Have a great time of day wherever you are, and we'll see you next week, if not earlier.
Absolutely. See you all next week, and thank you everyone for joining.
Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.